Hi everyone, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Finton.
First of all, thank you for joining us today in person or online. The KCLSU Presidential Debate is a way for Rural News, Kings TV, and the Politics Society to address the democratic gap in our student elections. With turnout often failing to attend even the 5% mark, we'd like to remind you of the importance of voting for your student experience and welfare. Voting will be open from the 4th to the 7th of March and can be done online through the KCLSU website or through on-campus polling stations, which can also be found on the KCLSU website. I'd also like to remind everyone that this debate is covered by the KCLSU Safe Space policy to ensure an inclusive and supportive space. And speakers and members of the audience are personally accountable for their language and behavior. Without further ado, I'll let Finton introduce the structure of the debate.
Thank you guys for coming today, I'd like to say as well, especially those of you in person. Our debate has been planned with the designating safeguarding officer of the KCLSU in order to comply with their requirements, including RAW's particular obligation to cover the elections impartially under student media rules. We're delighted that through the hard work of Kings TV and particularly RAW's comment editor, Ben Evans, we've been able to put forward the first ever KCLSU live presidential debate. Thank you to our 4 candidates for turning up in person. Our format is as follows. 60 seconds for each of the candidates to introduce themselves and their policy platform. The order has been randomly generated to ensure fairness amongst all of the candidates. 60 seconds to respond to a set starter question on student welfare and experiences as our first topic, followed by around 90 seconds of follow-up from myself and Lisa. We will then move on to each of the other candidates to address this same topic in turn. This format will then be repeated in different orders for the topics of society funding, housing advocacy, and communications and transparency. Between these 4 topics and the introductory statement, the idea is that each candidate will get to speak first, last, and at each intervening slot. Time permitting, we then hope to take audience questions, which you can submit using the Slido link available on all of our social media channels. Finally, each candidate will get a 30-second closing slot. If you'd like to give the candidates a chance to register any questions now, if you have any.
No. Thank you.
So, as you noticed, we have 6 KCLSU presidential candidates. Hassan has declined to attend, and the idea was for Charlie, who is currently traveling, to join via a live stream. He unfortunately hasn't been able to make it at the last minute. We are probably going to call him tonight in order to kind of make up this so that we can put out the same content for the 5 candidates who have agreed to work with us. We hope to make the tech work, but please be patient should we come across any issues. We have a whole team of people trying to work on it and to keep it together. So I guess, without further ado, I think it's time to start. We'd like to open up the floor first to your introductory statements, and the order that has been randomly chosen is to start with Malak. We'll have 60 seconds to start.
Thank you so much. Hello everyone, my name is Malak. I am studying religion, politics, and society here at King's. I was born and raised in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, to Egyptian parents, and I moved to the UK in 2017. During my time at King's, I was involved in a wide range of activities. I am a current committee member of the football team. I was a TRS committee member last year and the logistics coordinator for the Foreign Policy and Security Conference last year as well. These wide range of different activities allowed me to interact and meet and become friends with a bunch of different students studying very different degrees from all varying walks of life, and it allowed me to gain a holistic view of both the student experience and what goes right and unfortunately what also goes wrong within King's and the union. I will not have a siloed approach because of my experiences, and I hope I am able to convince you of this as this debate goes on. Thank you.
Thank you, Malak. Now we'll get to Advait to introduce himself and something.
Hi guys, I'm Advait. Most of you in this room know me. To those of you who don't, I'm a 3rd-year international relations student at King's. Let's crack on with it. Look, the Students' Union is meant to act as one thing, a student servant. Now, we try at KCLSU to do that while trying to be a political organization, and I think we fail miserably at both. Now, while this sounds like a doomsday speech, it isn't. There's a lot of good work the Students' Union does, and sometimes it gets a bit overshadowed by the flaws. The solution here is really simple, and I believe I've got it. Under my leadership, your Students' Union would refocus on its core priority, which is to help you. It would help you develop skills, help you find a job after uni, stay out of your way wherever possible as far as societies are concerned, and help tackle the troubles that often trouble you most, including the cost of living and accommodation crisis. It would be slimmer and no nonsense, but equipped for an efficient and honestly brilliant future. It's a simple goal, and we can achieve it. I have the solutions. All I need now is your trust, and hopefully I can convince you today as to exactly why. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Taj.
Hello, everyone at King's College London. I am Taj, and I'm excited to step forward as your candidate for KCLSU President. So who am I? I am a multi-award winning activist and advocate from the tiny island of Bermuda, and I study global health and social medicine here at KCL. My campaign is centered around fostering a transparent, active, and just student union, one that truly represents the diversity and dynamicism of the student body. KCLSU, as the oldest student union in the country, faces significant challenges in diversity amongst its student leadership. Despite the rich variety of demographics within our student body, we have yet to see a Black president and have only had one Black officer in the 150-year KCLSU history. This lack of representation is not just disappointing, it's unacceptable. I bring to the table a wealth of experience in advocacy and student leadership, deeply informed by unique challenges faced by many of my Black, LGBTQ+, and disabled peers. But let me be clear, I ask not for you to vote for me simply because I'm Black. I stand before you as the most experienced and qualified candidate, ready to champion a student union that listens, responds, and acts on behalf of all of its members.
Okay, Charlie, could you please introduce yourself and your manifesto, please?
Hello, my name is Charlie Hyde. I'm running for the presidency of King's College London, even though I think a lot of people don't feel the need to pay attention to student politics. I'd like to change that. I'd like to make the presidency and the rest of the student officers really useful in the daily lives of every student on things that I think are basic, but have a lot of positives associated with them. My main policy or policy program, which I believe is well integrated, is to try and make things run smoother, primarily through expanding timetables. I want to make life easier for staff and for students and for societies. And I'm almost certain that I can do it. I've done it before. I've worked in medical administration for 7 years, and I'm sure I can do it now. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to talking about it. Genuinely, thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Sahil and I'm a candidate for the KCLSU President this year. And I feel like my candidate is for a revolutionary leadership at KCLSU in the quest of like a vibrant and forward-thinking SU. And I feel like SU is a body for the students, by the students, and of the students. So I believe that having representation from all the students in the SU body would make it a better place for all of them. And I am currently a final year student in accounting and finance, and I'm currently the president of the India Society as well. And my idea of becoming the SU president was started from the India Society, looking at the difficulties I had, looking at how to run a society, looking at the student experience at SU, made me realize this is something that needs to be changed. And that is the main reason of me running this election. Also, I don't want to elaborate more on why I'm running this, because obviously my manifesto has all the points, but I feel like voting for me would help me to just work on the ground level and work for the students and the societies altogether. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll now start with our first topic, which is student welfare and experiences. I'm going to ask a question for all of you to answer. What do you think is the most important issue of student welfare that needs addressing? We're going to stick to that.
Yep.
So you have 60 seconds to answer.
Yep. Let me know when I can get going. Right. I think this is twofold. I think the mental health counselling services at King's are absolutely broken. I have friends who've had to wait months for an appointment. I think that should not be the case. But I think it's more about the problems that cause people to need this sort of counselling. It's stuff like, the cost of living, stuff like accommodation, stuff like wanting to make their fee payments in 3 separate installments, not being able to do it. There's a lot of root issues that don't really come to the fore as much. And my policy as your prospective KCLSU president would be to tackle these root issues, because when you do that, I think the majority of people wouldn't face as many problems as they do. And I think that would be at the core of my policy. That being said, there's a variety of different problems that students face, and I'm committed to hearing them and solving each of those issues. Thanks. Sorry, I went a couple of seconds, or 2 seconds over?
Yeah, we have a 90-second follow-up, so please feel free to keep the mic. I suppose my first question to you would be, how kind of materially would you talk about root problems? How would you materially attempt to tackle? For example, could you give us an example of something you would kind of be your intention would be to resolve?
Beg your pardon, could you repeat
So
that?
could you give an example? We've talked about these root issues. Could you give an example of something that you would try and solve and how that's within your power within the KCLSU?
Okay, yeah, of course. Now, sorry.
Keep going.
Really sorry. Right. So this is something that I had a conversation with our current KCLSU president Stephen and our VP Activity and Development there about. And the first thing that they told me is that each of these issues is solvable. It's doable. These aren't over the top and incredibly difficult to do, and we really can help. So with regards to the three installments, the 3 fee installments. This is something that our current student officers board has already taken a significant bit of work on, and it is something where I've been led to believe it's simply about taking it to the finish line, which I would be committed in doing. With regards to the cost of living and accommodation. Now, accommodation, this is something that I've detailed further on my manifesto as well. I would like to speak to Kings and allow private accommodation providers through verified forums like Open Rent to be let onto the KCL accommodation portal. More student-friendly accommodations on the portal itself, but also an increase in the amount of intercollegiate and halls accommodation that we provide. Now, this is one of the biggest issues that students face. As an international myself, I can't tell you how big of a headache it was trying to find a guarantor each of my 3 years. So this is something that would streamline it further. With regards to cost of living, again, it's more about efficiency than an increase in the funds itself that we give to people. So, yeah, 5 seconds. I'm so sorry. So again, in that regard, I will cover this further. But with regards to the cost of living, I would like to take similar initiatives.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
We'll pass the mic just to your left again.
Yes.
So what do you think is the most important issue of student welfare that needs addressing?
Sure. I think it's no secret that the most important issue students are facing, whether they're international or home students, is the cost of living crisis. I think that is clear. I think we all know that. I think the current officer team has been doing some work around that area. And I think anyone who gets elected this year will also be doing work around that area. I also think, and looking at the cost of living crisis, it's the students from minority backgrounds that are the most affected. You can look it up. Research shows that people of minority backgrounds, whether they be disabled, LGBTQ+, POC, or international students, have a harder time with the cost of living crisis. So for me, it's about increasing support specifically for those demographics. And this could look like a variety of things, but specific hardship funds for different groups of students, so that not everyone is competing for the same funds, and so that those most at risk can have access to the funds that they need. Yeah. Another thing I plan to do, I think, is also support students in their mental health. As Avit mentioned, student mental health is hugely affected by the cost of living crisis.
Yeah. Just my follow-up question was kind of what materially is it within the KCLSU's power to do to support these kind of mental health concerns that you laid out as important to your campaign?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I mentioned was specific hardship funds. KCLSU, as the president, I plan to advocate for that in Kings. KCLSU doesn't have any power over that per se, but I think one thing that Kings can really do specifically is around societies, and it's about offering societies more funding specifically to support underrepresented groups, and also offer their members hardship funds as well. This is something I've been pushing for as a liberation officer myself within KCLSU, is for societies to be able to support their members with transport fees and any other fees associated with attending society events, so that the financial burden is not a reason for you to not participate in this wider student community. Yeah, that's the main thing.
I guess we still have 45 seconds. I guess my question is, if you get in and you're told by senior management that there's a limited pot of money and that there's not enough of these initiatives, how could we go about? Would there be some kind of cost-cutting measures, or how would you go about solving this problem? Or is there a way you could do this with less money?
Sure. I think it's about kind of reallocating the funds a bit, shifting them around. Kings relies heavily on its endowments. KCLSU relies heavily on its endowment from Kings specifically. So it's about advocating for the increase of that endowment as the cost of living crisis gets more and more, affects more and more people. I think that would be a key part of kind of anything that the SU wants to do, or any of the presidents want to do. We're trying to get that endowment increased to reflect the cost of living crisis, and so that sports societies and other societies are not disproportionately affected by KCLSU cost-cutting measures.
What do you think is the most important issue of student welfare that needs addressing? And you have 60 seconds.
I believe that welfare shouldn't be separated from other aspects of university organization. For example, I think that it's a pretty big oversight that societies are underfunded, that there is blocks to going to sports on Wednesdays, that there are barriers to entries financially because societies provide the type of social network and physical health that are bastions of mental health. So we have the institutions that could be available to people to get out and improve their lot, but they're completely crammed in whatever campus they're on with the workload they have to do. And then they don't have the academic support alongside that or the access to because it's always booked up. And so you have this just everything coming together to suppress welfare, and then we're spending more after the fact to bring in new support. And I don't see it changing unless we change the timetabling system.
So could you explain a little bit more about how you would go about doing this? How would you change timetabling? Because obviously this is your big central policy pitch.
Of course. So I was consulted twice in November on this kind of theme. First for expanding the assessment period for January, and second on diversifying assessment, for which I was the sole student for Strand campus to attend. The outcome of those sessions, alas, was step marking, which has caused more confusion, but I think step marking is a symptom. It's not actually the cause of problems. I think the real cause is that there just isn't enough time in the term. I found out in those sessions that the 10-week term is pretty arbitrary. I think it can be expanded. We know it can because reading weeks were introduced in such a way to provide that gap. So long as there's at least 10 weeks of teaching, that's fine. We have allocated time for careers, allocated time for academic support, perhaps, then the actual content could be spread out a bit better. And this also takes pressure off academics. I've spoken with, I don't think I'm actually allowed to mention the staff names here, but I have spoken with staff, especially ones with a research interest in reformulating how we do education in this country based on a bunch of pedagogy, can't say the word, but based a bunch of literature. And he's very engaged with it, and I reached out to him. He'd love to help. I've also reached out to UCL because they have an academic writing app that I think could be well adapted, but that's a secondary point. It's not quite timetabling, so I'll leave that to another bit.
Thank you very much.
What do you think is the most important issue of student welfare that needs addressing?
So thank you for the question. So I believe obviously the living crisis is a big problem the students are facing right now. So the rising cost and the housing crisis, but I feel like uni should be a place for all the students just to come here, enjoy, and just experience what actually university and uni life is. And just building on a platform where students can actually raise their voices, comment on what they feel like should be changed, and just building on a platform where students have that say to, like, not just the students but the university leaders as well, and just pointing out what they want to be changed and what they actually want. And also, like, the big part of their uni life is societies, and just making societies a better structure and just allowing them to work better in hand with the students would make the experience a lot better and would allow them to work better. Because for me as well, personally, sports was one of the things which was in a way get away from my studies, but again, shifting, not having the cricket society not having the enough funds just to manage net sessions and sports events made it really difficult for me to just cope up with my studies as well.
Thank you, sir. I guess my follow-up question is, how would you ensure this kind of constant and active communication between student groups and yourself as part of the senior leadership team?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in my manifesto as well, so all students who are part of KCL are automatic members of the KCLSU, and KCLSU already has an app, but it's not looked upon as a very reliable app, and it's not programmed further. But I feel like we can build on that community, because as KCLSU has details of every student, because they're already a part of the KCLSU, we can build on that platform. We can make chats. For example, if you're a part of a certain society, you can just be on that chat and be that community and just voice out whatever you want. And also, we can have specified for like an open communication center on the app as well, just where they can point out if they find something's wrong, if they feel something's going to come up. So all the students can just point out, have their voices out there, communicate with other students, because there's no such platform for all students just to be there at once and communicate freely. People have to make small group chats, and which obviously, like we know, group chats have a certain number of limit up to how many people can be there, but an open communication would be better for just to communicate, spread their ideas. And if, for example, a society is having a big event, they can just point it out there, just be it out there, so that they can have as much as people and engagement as possible.
How would you make yourself available? We only have 20 seconds left.
Yeah, so I also said in my manifesto that I want to do a town hall event, a frequent town hall events. For example, the SU board, student board would be sitting and the students would be invited and they can just point out the questions. They can question the accountability and the transparency and anything they can point out, and the SU is there to answer.
Thank you very much.
No,
That's the mic
thank
to
you.
your left as well. I'll repeat the question one final time.
What do you think is the most important issue of student welfare that needs addressing?
So I think the most important issue is mental health. A healthy student is a happy student, and that starts with having good mental health. And there are a lot of stressors that students face: housing crisis, rent, loneliness, anxiety, etc. For example, speaking to students, if you're not in the UK and you require counseling services, the self-referral can only offer you 30-minute sessions and no follow-up. And I think this is extremely damaging. We as students are humans first and then students second. So a focus on mental health and, I guess, accessibility for all students, regardless of where you are, is a top priority. And that will definitely increase overall student happiness and welfare.
I suppose what other kind of initiatives do you think the union has the capability to offer, maybe within current structures, or would you introduce something new in how you would distribute it?
So currently there are self-referral forms, but I think that issues have to be addressed proactively instead of waiting for students to complain, to suffer alone for a while before they then self-refer themselves. And sometimes it reaches a point where you don't even know you need help, and it shouldn't get to that point. So the self-referral platform that's already available, I think we need to expand it, look into hiring more staff, better trained staff that are able to check in with students periodically instead of waiting for them to complain. Another thing that you can introduce is, like I said, if a student isn't in the UK, then they unfortunately do not have access to the King's Counselling Services, only a 30-minute session and no follow-up. And if you're back home, then sure, maybe you can try and find help. But if you're traveling, if you're in a foreign country, you could feel even more hopeless, even more lonely. And I do not want students to go through that and to see that happening. So I think that's one of the most important things.
Yeah, I guess my last question, just so you have the full time with other candidates, what other areas of welfare would be important to you in just only about 25 seconds?
So I will hopefully get the chance to go into this further, but sports and engagement within the student body, whether it be through sports, arts, creativity, it's important for you to be as involved in student life as possible. You build a community and you make lifelong friends, so that's very important.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
So now on to our next topic, which is society funding. So we're going to start with Taj. How would you deal with claims about societies being underfunded? And that's just a question every candidate will have the chance to answer.
Sure. So as the president of the LGBTQ+ society for the last 2 years and the founder of another society and the president of that society, I deeply understand that funding is a huge issue. And as well as being a liberation officer for the last 2 years, we actually approved funding for Liberation History Month, and the amount of money we've been given is not great. I think one of the most important things that can be done is increasing transparency around where the development fund specifically goes. I think if students have access to that information, a clear breakdown of this society got this money, this society got this amount, and also kind of the areas in which the money is going. So if the money is going to cultural societies or sports societies, I think that will really help students understand kind of where the money is going, and seeing that it's not being wasted, I suppose. Another key thing would be offering societies financial workshops, specifically around securing external sponsorship. I think that's a hugely underutilized thing that societies can do. Very few societies do it, and they do it very well. I think having workshops on that would be important.
Thanks, keeping my follow-up, unless Lisa has one. My follow-up question would be: do you think that you would in favour of the kind of pot system where different societies bid for funding, or would that be an area for you to maybe perhaps reconsider?
Yeah, go ahead. I don't think the pot system is necessarily the best way to go about it. I think actually the current system kind of works well. I just think if there's more transparency about the system, who's approving the funding, and kind of where the money is going, then I think students will feel a lot more confident knowing that information and understand that the money isn't being wasted or isn't going to certain preference of societies, etc. Because the union really does try its best with the very little funds that are given from King's. So yeah, I think a key part would be sorry. I think a key part would be, once again, that external sponsorship. I think that would be really, really key for societies. I know, like the ACS, for example, gets a huge amount of their funding externally, and that really helps them be able to throw bigger scale events. And I think if other societies had the training and the skills to seek those external sponsorships, I think that will increase the amount of activities they're able to offer. Also, going back to a previous point I mentioned, I think societies should also be able to, once again, establish, I think there should be a financial accessibility fund, which is separate from the development fund, separate from the liberation fund. But it's specifically, this is to enable societies to encourage their members to attend the events without having to worry about travel costs, membership fees, and other costs associated with sporting societies or any other events. So this could kind of cover those students who do not have the funds to do so, to participate in those events.
How would you deal with claims about societies being underfunded? And you'll start with the 60 seconds and then we'll move on to the later 90 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you. I have reached out to dozens of societies and also just spoken to students in daily life, asked them what societies they're part of. And there's pretty much a common theme where they're told there is no money, but then they also have to deal with a huge amount of bureaucracy, which I feel like represents a lot of trapped money. There's a lot of admin, excessive admin for risk assessments, for reimbursements, which are often delayed. So that also takes money out of the pockets of the students. And the new rules about membership and elections have just caused even more headaches. If we kind of take time to be money, there's a lot of wasted time and a lot of wasted money here. I think if the SU simply made it a bit simpler, they could see some money appear. Apart from that, I also am in contact with some of the fellows of King's College, and I know they're not particularly happy either, and I'm sure they'd be open to lobbying for a little change on the endowment.
I guess I have an obvious follow-up question in that. Do you think that this is something that you could aim for within the year of your tenure if you were elected, or is this a kind of longer-term ambition that you would hope to bring us to start this kind of change?
I think no doubt I could do this within a year, even just the small steps. But I think I don't know what it would be yet, but I could 100% be in control of making things a bit simpler. I've had, as I said, dozens of conversations, and it feels like the people who have gone out there and got themselves elected to run societies, they're serious people. You know, for the most part, they just kind of need some belief to be had in them, and you can assume they're going to do the right thing. The organization of even this event, this is mind-boggling. Like the idea that the students can't be not held responsible, but that they're not responsible with finances when they clearly care so deeply about these institutions. And again, I'm going to bring it back. I think it's a misnomer to say that not only is there no money, but that their money should be spent more on other things like well-being, when societies should be championed as ways to improve well-being. Kings's worst metrics, by the way, are student belonging and management. So I feel like there's a two birds, one stone thing here, where if we improve management, we can also be improving student belonging by empowering societies. Feels like it's within our grasp to at least take the right steps forward, and that's all we need to do.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Now, how would you deal with claims about societies being underfunded?
So first of all, being a part of the cricket society as well, like I mentioned before, we had problems for the net session because the society didn't have money. But also, I believe, like as a president of the Indian Society as well, funding has been a big problem, because even though sometimes if you're not underfunded and you have enough funds, the SQ takes ages just to release that fund, and they take they need proper receipt, they need exact, until unless they get the entire data, they won't be able to release it, and which is fair, but they will need to do it in time. And I believe that underfunding is a big problem, especially in the sports society segment, because sports is something that you really need funds for. Therefore, I believe if not even providing funding, they could provide sponsorship from the SU to them, because like we said, SU runs on the endowments given by the King's College London, and they have a specific amount to be allocated to societies, but there's an increment every year on the amount they get from the KCL. Therefore, I believe that properly structuring that money into societies where it's actually needed and just being transparent about the same would help a lot.
I suppose my follow-up question would be, how would you deal with perhaps a KCLSU advocate would suggest that the current SAG reports are published? Is that not enough transparency? How would you go further with that? Because that reports all incomings and outgoings from societies. How would you go further in your mission for transparency?
The SAG report helps us a lot to just figure out how much money the society has and how much money other societies have. That's being transparent about what society has what kind of money, but the transparent the KCLSU needs to show is where the money they've been endowed for is going. So that's a separate kind of transparency which we're talking about here. The society for us, like India society, earns through sponsorships, earns through contracts made with other external bodies, and that's reflected there. But it's not, nothing is being reflected where, for example, if SU has this much money, how much money is going to the societies, how much money is going for their welfare, how much society is going for this part. So that's more transparent. That's been more transparent. That's showing how and where the money is going, so the societies know that where the funds are being used for.
We have 45 seconds left. If you made all of these reforms and they were all successful, and a society came to you at the end and said, I still feel like my society has been shortchanged, how would you deal with this?
Obviously, it's 1 year is not a big time to change everything up. I feel we can start doing so, and it will take a few years, but if we start a reform, I feel like, and if it goes down with time, it would help all societies, because I personally, managing a sports society and a culture society as well, have experience, and as I want to work from the ground level. Therefore, I believe that changes I'm talking about right now would help a student and would help a society a lot, because these are some of the issues which I have come across, and which, if these are solved in the order which I'm planning for, it would help a lot. And obviously, it won't be happening in 1 year. It will take time, but it will do help them.
Thank you very much.
No.
Just again, Mike to the
Okay.
How would you deal with claims of a society being underfunded?
All right. So speaking from personal experience, being part of the football committee, I know that we were severely underfunded this year, and it's severely damaging as well for committee members who rely on that funding. A lot of members have grants and they receive external funding to support their studies. So by the football committee then being underfunded, we aren't able to support the students who in the beginning need help to begin with. And student groups are a big part of campus life. They help with personal development and building connections and friends. So it's important to look into developing these communities and helping them instead of getting them to then reach out externally and look for their own funding. The university needs to support their students and needs to support their communities first.
How would you address concerns of our funding strategy, and would you approach it for if it's a society or a sports group?
Sorry, could you?
Yeah. How would you address concerns over different funding strategies?
Okay.
And would this differ from sports group to?
Okay. So different strategies could include restructuring the current budget, look into where the union is pushing most of their money and seeing if this can be redistributed, again with a big push to explaining that student groups and societies are a big part of campus life. We need to advocate for them, and we need to tell the union, and we need to show them that this is an important part of student life. And it's not to say that I would prioritize sports or arts or any other society over the other. We need a balance, and there needs to be fairness for all. So sponsorships, if a society is able to get that from external sources, then that's great. But unfortunately, not everyone has those connections. Not everyone is able to do that. So we need to look at King's. We need to look at the union and ask them to support us the way we need to be supported, instead of looking at external sources.
Yeah, we have 30 seconds left. So I guess my last question would be, and quickly on the sports. I know that you don't want to dwell on that because you're a sports. But would you suggest that how would you help the union promote sports all year round rather than just at varsity and academy?
So currently, don't quote me on this, there are about 10,000 students that are part of the sports. So, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. It's a huge part of campus life. And instead of having one big event or two macadam and varsity at the end of the year, we could look into having winter tournaments, or maybe even instead of just our rivalry with UCL, look into other universities as well. So there's a bunch of different things.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
So our next topic is housing advocacy, and we'll start with Sahil. Oh, sorry.
I didn't have a question, that's all.
Sorry. How would you deal with claims about societies being underfunded?
Right. So this isn't a question for me purely about being underfunded. It's multifaceted, and that's how I'm going to take this. As far as funds go, I don't think funds are anywhere near as important as what our societies are doing with them. I've spoken to tens of societies throughout my campaign, and the one thing that they've always told me is we don't feel like we're trained adequately enough to handle our funds. Now, and for me, that is the biggest problem. If I give every society £2,000 more, but I don't tell them how to spend it properly, they're going to run through that in a matter of weeks, if not months. So the first thing that I would do is fix that. Tell societies how best to handle their money, and they're going to be fine. Sahil mentioned cricket. I play cricket for Kings as well. We started the year in debt because there was a ball last year that left the society so far down in the red. That should never happen, and that wouldn't happen if there was training. So that's number one. Secondly, we are lobbying. I would like to lobby Kings for more funding. My manifesto says that we're planning on doing that to the tune of £50,000, which would go into a scholarship fund, more on which in follow-up.
I guess easy in the follow-up is to say, do you think that it's feasible to lobby Kings? Do you think that you'd get answers, and do you think you'd get answers fast?
Absolutely. I think the sum that we're lobbying the SU for at the moment, as my manifesto says, is about £50,000, which would go into a scholarship fund to be distributed to societies for events on a needs basis, right? So that's the first thing. Do I think it's possible? Absolutely. There's a fee hike year on year. Kings makes more money year on year, and they can afford to give us a crumb of a crumb of a crumb. So can we do it? Yes. Secondly, it's not just about that. It's also about, besides training, there are a number of societies that have their funds frozen. Now, I've spoken to two societies today, over the course of this campaign. One of them had £2,400 in a KCLSU account. It was frozen. They were offered £60 back out of 2,400. There are a number of cases where there's frozen funds that can be mobilized, which just give societies that much more liquidity. That was the first thing I would do. Because, honestly, while there are regulatory mechanisms, and I appreciate them, they cannot be restrictive to the point where they stop societies from being able to carry out their functions. So that is another thing. And, that's a general outlook on how I want the SU to deal with societies. We should aim to empower, not interfere or stifle. And that's what I would do. I would put societies in a place where they can deal with these issues well, and then leave them to do what they do best. So if that could be me putting my campaign in a sentence, that would be it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so now on to the next topic, which is housing advocacy. And here you would be the first one speaking. Incumbent President Steven Suresh ran on a platform last year, including a rent guarantee scheme. How serious do you think the housing shortage issue is for King students, and what would you do to help remedy the problem?
Again, bringing back my idea that I think welfare, mental health, student belonging needs to be a lens for everything else that the student union does, because it is King's worst metric, and I don't see the actual institution of the university doing stuff about it in quite the same way a union could. I have actually had conversations with department heads who are responsible, at least in part, for accommodation choices for their students. And something I brought up with them is that the new accommodation blocks, the high rises, that are so expensive, even just for first years, are also the places with the worst student belonging. Places like Moonraker, most expensive accommodation in the country, belongs to King's. I don't see the point in contracting out any further housing to be that expensive, which is also causing more costly mental health problems down the line, So making better belonging should save us more and improve costs.
Yeah, I guess I have a follow-up question here, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
Lisa. The newest residence for King's College London is planned to open this September, and that one is something like 70% CAS, so King's Affordable Accommodation Scheme housing. Is it not uncharitable for the argument to be that King's aren't doing enough? Yes, they have the Moonrakers, but are they not doing? How can they go further in kind of rectifying this issue in the short term?
I think the new affordable accommodation scheme, will see how it pans out, because Great Dover Street was also advertised somewhat similar. I'm aware of the renovations that have gone on in Great Dover Street. I almost feel it's missing the mark a little bit, because I wonder if prices will still start to go up under the market, which anyone who studies political economy knows that that's kind of a flexible term. I think King's making the decision to have affordable accommodation is very good. My worry is that the more modern and updated it becomes, they will start to kind of cyclically strip out the belonging again. So Great Dover Street and Stamford Street were the first. The later accommodations people have had worse experiences with. So doing it sustainably, I think, brilliant. I'm very excited to see what happens with it. It isn't something that, funny enough, has been discussed with me, even though I've had these conversations with department heads, which brings me to the issue of communication, but that's probably not something for the housing advocacy section. So we will see.
So do you think that this is to what extent symptomatic of a London issue, and to what extent is it symptomatic of a King's issue? And you have only 10 seconds, I'm afraid, left.
Oh, well, the Tories have been selling out the Greenbelt for about 2 decades or something like that. So the Greenbelt is crushing supply, and then at the same time, they're allowing big whales to build on it. So they're going to have to change. Next election, let's go.
So we're going to start with Sahil, and the question is, the incumbent president, Stephen Suresh, ran on a platform last year, including a rent guarantor scheme. How serious do you think the housing shortage issue is for King's student, and what would you do to help remedy the problem?
Being an interested student, I would first of all take a guarantor for a flat, so I would look into student accommodations. Even I started looking in Feb and March, and then by then all the student accommodations are gone. So this is a huge problem students face right now. So one of the big things that SU can help with the students is providing the college for like partner with different accommodations, for example, Scape, Chatters, anything, and just try and make room available for them. And also not just at the high prices that they charge, but also cap the prices which they can charge. I know KCL is a student body with around 40,000 students. So they need somewhere to stay. So I believe that SU can do that a lot. They have funds for that. They just need to allocate the funds towards the housing advocacy. And I believe that providing and partnering with different student accommodation bodies would help to just increase the number of student accommodation rooms available to the students, but also increasing the CAS rooms available, the King's Affordable Accommodation Scheme, which would allow for cheaper and more accessible rooms.
Thank you very much. How practical do you think an idea such as a cap on housing would be? How would you lobby for it? And I would suggest that you might get some pushback from the university. How would you counter that? How would you make that case?
So first of all, every year there's not even a 10%, there's like a 30% increase in the room price. I was staying in a room price around £300, jumped to £390 this year. It's around 30% increase, which I believe is not a feasible amount for an international student to pay per week. It caps around £20,000 a year. That's why I believe that just capping it and not increasing in the next year would not make a huge difference to the student bodies and the SU as well. They just need to partner well, just need to make sure that they have enough rooms available for the students in order to make sure that they have housing available, because student body, after all, the SU is for the students, and they have enough funds, have endowment funds just to cap up the room rent and just make it available for the students.
Do you think, for example, the rent guarantor scheme is practical, the one that Stephen Suresh ran on last year? Would you attempt to revive this project, or would you focus on other measures?
The rent guarantor is something that is a bit difficult to just have, because as an industry you would need a guarantor just to book a flat and anything, but they would need to take your responsibility, and it's just hard for a person to do. Therefore, I believe this is something that really needs to be looked upon further, and it's not something that could be taken into action as immediately as possible. But we need to work more freely on this, we need more time on that, and we need to make sure that the people who take in charge of you make sure that actually have that responsibility over them, and they make sure that you don't go into any problems for them. So we need to work on that because that's one big thing. Because except for accommodation, flats the only option students have, and it really makes a difference if you find a flat with your friends and have a rent guarantee because you don't need to pay upfront for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Incumbent President Stephen Suresh ran on a platform last year, including a rent guarantor scheme. How serious do you think the housing shortage issue is for King's students? What would you do to help remedy the problem?
So the housing crisis and the housing shortage is a big issue. Speaking from personal experience, I am actually a commuter student because I not only was not able to find housing in London, I wasn't able to afford it, and that meant that I spend more time on the trains and on public transport coming into uni, sometimes even for an hour session, and I spend money on TfL, I take the train, I take the underground, and then finally a bus to get into uni. And if I was obviously able to find a place in London, that would not be the case. And I know that there are a lot of students in the same position as me. We should not have to spend that much time commuting into uni, spending over an hour just to attend an hour, 2, or even a full day. Doesn't make a difference, but it is a lot of time spent. And had there been a house for me and many other students in the same position as me, we would be in similar positions like our other peers who are able to live on campus and who have been lucky enough to find a place.
And how do you think KCLSU can help students with affording a decent place to live in?
So the union could back students if a student was, all right, let me start again. If a student was to start a campaign or start a protest, for say, for better housing, if they gather a lot of students with them, and if the union then backs them, then it is an official channel and it is a stronger collective action to then take to private housing or private student accommodations or even King's accommodations. And it won't be just students, it would be the uni is acknowledging that this is a huge problem and we stand with our students and we will help them find a solution for this.
To what extent do you think this even is an issue of kind of the university or even the students' union? To what extent is this just an issue of London? How would you kind of, I'm sure that's some of the pushback you'll get from the university, how would you kind of argue that there is a place for the university in advocating for this kind of thing?
Do you mean in terms of there being a lack of housing just in London?
Yes.
In terms of, well, of course, London being a huge city, it could be an issue just that Londoners face, but that doesn't make it any less of an issue. Just because students in other unis don't face the same issues doesn't mean that we can chop it up to, the housing crisis in London is a problem that everyone faces, just kind of deal with it. This is something that the uni itself needs to take seriously, and it needs to listen to when the students say, I can't afford this anymore, or I am being forced to move out. On top of that, having to deal with their studies, this is something that needs to be taken seriously.
Thanks.
Incumbent President Stephen Suresh ran on a platform last year, including a rent guarantee scheme. How serious do you think the housing shortage issue is for King's students, and what would you do to help remedy the problem?
Right. Here there is a shortage, and that I think is undeniable, but I don't think some of the solutions we've heard put forth today are practical or I believe efficient. A cap was mentioned, and I think honestly that's unrealistic. The best we can do in terms of a quote cap is to control the amount by which there is an increase, but if there is rising demand, there will be rising rent. That is how the market works, and that is not something that the KCLSU or its president can control. Now, fact is that flats are cheaper, and people might not like me saying this because it doesn't sound good, but flats are cheaper, student accommodation is expensive, and there's frankly very little we can do to control that fact in and of itself. And this is more a case about that sort of financial literacy, yes, but also the ability to be the early bird that gets the worm, to use a phrase I've been waiting to use that for God knows how long. Yeah.
How would you help these early birds?
It's something that I mentioned previously, right? I've been working with the Indian National Students Association for the better part of a year now, and this is something that we deal with across the country. Now, the way we've solved that is we've gotten in touch with more and more of these accommodation providers across the country, London included, to increase the availability and B, offer these students the first option on such flats. Now, the fact of the matter is finding a house in London is just that hard, and a first option would be so massive in terms of the importance it would have on students. So that would be number one. Number two, more help with guarantor info, and obviously in addition to more accommodation. And it's just a case where I'll bring in my own personal experience into this. The place that I lived at last year cost £293 a week. This year it went up to about £360. I found a flat at King's Cross which is bigger, better, and I pay £250 a week for it. Now, that is a massive decrease. And why did that happen? Because I was the early bird to get to the worm, and because this organization that I worked with helped me. So, I mean, I understand that the Students' Union or the university itself can't be the solution with regards to the housing crisis. It can definitely offer help. I refuse to believe that they can't. So, yeah, that's what I do. I know there's only 10 seconds left, but if you have a question for me.
I don't think we're ready.
Lovely.
We'll go to Tosh. Incumbent President Stephen Suresh ran on a platform last year, including a rent guarantor scheme. How serious do you think the housing shortage is for King's students, and what would you do to help remedy the problem?
Sure. So, as some of you may know, if you've looked at my manifesto, I'm the LGBTQ plus officer for the NUS. So I've been working kind of extensively around this issue, specifically around housing and policy, and advocating for better housing policy nationwide, specifically as the election is upcoming in the UK. So that's something that I've been working on and passionately advocating for. But in King's specifically, I think one thing that would help hugely is taking an equitable approach. So this would mean a means-tested housing scheme for at least one or two of King's accommodations, so that students who cannot afford to live in London, underrepresented groups, would be able to afford their housing, and it would be well within their limits so that they could afford to do society events, to feed themselves, etc., without necessarily having to get a job and put strain on their studies. I think a means-tested housing scheme would be crucial for that specifically.
I think it's my first or an obvious follow-up question is that the King's Affordable Accommodation Scheme already exists. This CAS scheme. How would you? What would be your interest in improving or expanding it?
Yeah. I think it could be improved significantly, specifically to represent underrepresented groups that are more at risk for housing difficulties, specifically LGBTQ plus students, specifically trans students, specifically disabled students. I think there needs to be more work around making that more equitable and more intersectional in the way that housing scheme works specifically. To extend further, I think something I mentioned earlier would be crucial. I think in the interim, understanding that we won't be able to fix the housing crisis in London just at King's, I think two things we could really do would be to offer, once again, travel funds. Departments do this. I've attended several department events in my department where they've offered a travel reimbursement fund, so that students who are commuting further can afford to come to class, come to events, etc. And I think that could be really crucial, especially for students who commute from the home. In addition to that, I think one crucial aspect would be a renters' rights education. I think that would be really crucial, as students are perhaps one of the most vulnerable renting populations, as their knowledge around renting, especially in the private sector, is very little. So they often get taken advantage of by landlords. And I think if King's developed a specific program to, one, educate, and also offer support services that are trained in housing issues, to offer legal advice and dispute resolution around that area, I think that would be really helpful as well in the interim, given that King's will not alone be able to fix the housing crisis in the UK.
Thank you very much.
Now on to our last topic, communication and transparency. So we're going to start with Sahil, and the question is, some students feel that the KCLSU is not doing enough to address students' key concerns. How would you make communication more effective so that important student issues are actively addressed?
So like I mentioned before as well, I would want to have a regular town hall event, like a quarterly or by 2 monthly town hall event, where the SU board, student board sits down and the students can come up, ask whatever questions they have regarding accountability, transparency, any concerns, and they can raise their voice, they can ask us anything and we're there to answer them. We can host that event so that they have utmost transparency and utmost trust on the SU board as well. But also talking about the student communication platform I spoke about, that would help, and that would allow students not to just talk to the SU, but different students, voice out their concerns from the whole college, in terms of different society concerns, anything they can just voice out on that platform. This would allow them to feel more included in the societies and feel more included in the uni as well, while also feeling a bit more heard and their voices being heard in terms of being, if there's any issues, in terms of any communication problems, in terms of any concerns, any problems they have, they can just be there on that platform, and it would help them a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. My follow-up question, I suppose, was who do you think is an important decision maker within the KCLSU? I presume yourself, you would put forward for this kind of thing. Who else is important in the KCLSU to come forward? Would it be your fellow officers? Would it be permanent KCLSU employees? Who do you think is important to meet the students?
So first of all, obviously, like I said, it would be the student leaders, because they are the ones who are chosen by the students. So they are the one who are accountable and answerable to all the questions they have at that moment. But also staff members are the ones who are going to be there for the entirety, irrespective of who wins the election. They are the ones who are going to be there, even the years to follow on. So it's not just being answerable to them, it's just being accountable as well. They are the ones who need to be there. You need to listen to the students and work for long term. We are there only for 1 year. We can just make a change, a small change in that 1 year. We'll try our best to be accountable and answerable in that certain time duration we are there. But the staff members are also they play a huge role in being answerable and accountable and being transparent, as they're the ones who are going to be there for the long term. They're the ones who are going to work on the motives and the vision we have. So they're the ones who need to be there to answer all the problems.
No
And
worries,
in the
thank you.
interest of our own kind of communication and transparency, Sahil's gone first twice in a row. The intention was to have Charlie go first last time, just to be in the spirit of the question.
No worries, thank you.
And pass the mic to you.
Yeah, sure.
Some students feel that the KCLSU is not doing enough to address students' key concerns. How would you make communication more effective so that important student issues are actively addressed?
So for starters, I have seen from my other fellow candidates that a town hall, weekly council session, or a similar initiative is something that has been mentioned by all of us, and that goes to show that that clearly is an issue with transparency within the SU, and students do really feel that they aren't being heard, or they aren't being roped into decisions, or they're left in the dark most of the time. So, like I said, I will hold council sessions that are open to all students to be able to come voice their concerns, or even just listen and be part of the decision making. And another thing is, with transparency, mentioning the SAG reports, a lot of students don't even know what that is, or they don't have the skills to kind of understand what these reports are. So I think it's important for us to introduce a way for us to have these reports presented in a way that is accessible and understandable for all students and people with learning difficulties, etc.
I'll come back to the SAG report if we
Sure.
have time for a second
All right.
question. My first one would be, I suppose, to play devil's advocate. Theo, who's sitting here as VP of Activities and Development, has been hosting weekly office hours this week. Would you, or indeed, how would you go further than that?
So speaking to her, this is something that a lot of students have benefited. Me, myself, being part of a sports committee, I visited it once, and I kind of got an understanding as to, well, for example, we unfortunately do not have varsity this year, and visiting Thea, I was able to understand why that was the case, speaking to my other committee members. So I did receive a bit of transparency, and that was great. But unfortunately, not all students maybe have the time to do so. So definitely office hours, online, in person, just as accessible for everyone as possible, because it's important for your president, whoever it is, to be approachable and to be there and accessible for everyone, not just kind of a figure who you hear about in the news or you see in an article and you can't kind of approach.
In terms of the SAG reports as well, like I suggested, how would you go about making them more transparent? Because they are quite complicated at the moment. What would you do
Of course. So first, understanding that there are people with a lot of learning difficulties, differences, presenting it in a way, maybe visually, audibly, written, even just with simpler language. And for starters, even telling students where to find it, having kind of a introductory session where you can go in and you're aware of these reports, you know that they exist, you know how to find them, and you know that they are in different formats should you require a different format.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so some students feel that the KCLSU is not doing enough to address students' key concerns. How would you make communication more effective so that important student issues are actively addressed?
I I think they're right. I think we have a students' union that, at its core, is quite opaque. While, as Malik said, our officers this year have made an active effort to help solve that, and I appreciate that greatly. But the fact of the matter is, this problem still remains. Now, just yesterday, I heard an allegation, and I want to make this clear that it is an allegation and not proven, that the students' union was missing up to £100,000 in money. Now, while this may or may not be true, the fact that we don't know is the root of the problem for me. A students' union should aim to be open to its students. If a students' union isn't answerable to its students, then, why do we even exist? So, at its core, what would I do? Number one, just keep that constant stream of communication going. I think the fact that some societies have to wait weeks, if not days, for a response is absolutely ghastly. I would start off by fixing that.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, obviously we don't know the substance of that allegation and can't comment further on if it's true. You phrased it appropriately as such, as unsubstantiated. How would you go about installing a place in which students can come forward with questions like these if they did hear a rumour or some sort of thing? How would you go about, what would be the first thing that you would want someone here in the room to do if they heard something like this?
The first thing that I would want someone to do if they heard something like this is, all of my colleagues have mentioned a town hall, and I agree with them. It's a good job. It's a good initiative, and I think we should flesh it out and see what happens over there. What would I want them to do? It's come to these events, or honestly, just get to a point where you feel like you can send that email across to anyone. Approach your leader, your student leaders. Come and have a conversation with them. I've made this clear since the beginning, but a students' union role is not that of a student politician, it's that of a student servant. So I really want to focus on that. Your student union leaders are not there to act as politicians, they're there to serve you, and they're there for you to hold them to account. So what I would want is for students to be able to do that openly.
How would you differ in your approach to, for example, a politician? Like, what would you shy away from, for example, in the light of communication and transparency?
Well, to go away from the things that sort of polarize people the most politically. We've had 3 officers this year that were suspended for their politics, and while I may agree with them on the political issue itself, the fact of the matter is that they weren't elected to go there and make that political statement. Now, again, this might make me unpopular, but it's the hard truth. The fact that we had officers engaging in politics while not doing their jobs was, for me, ghastly. Like, if I have an MP that plays good football, great. But that's not why I'm going to elect them there. The reason why they were elected was to do their job, and they didn't do it. So as far as I'm concerned, we'd start off by fixing that. We'd get a union that does its job first and everything else later. Thank you. And I'm so sorry for overshooting the time.
Some students feel that the KCLSU is not doing enough to address students' key concerns. How would you make communication more effective so that important student issues are actively addressed?
Sure. But just to offer a point of clarity first, I think the union's job is inherently political. And if you've ever looked at the KCLSU bylaws, you'll notice that the student officers, one of their key roles is to be the political leadership of the union. Now, why would that wording be used in the bylaws if KCLSU wasn't fundamentally, as all charities are, political organizations? That they're meant to advocate for their members, aka students, but also support them. So I think, yes, KCLSU is lacking in supporting them, but I think to sideline the political agenda would be a huge misstep in that era. But as all my other candidates have mentioned, I think a key part would be weekly office hours, something that I actually recommended to Thea. Thea implemented and took that advice, so I'm very thankful for that. So yeah, that's something that's very close to my heart, would be having weekly office hours, as well as regular student forums, specifically so that students can engage with the SLT of both King's and KCLSU. I think that would be very important. Yeah, I can go more and do follow-up.
Yeah, I guess the follow-up is naturally into what you hope to achieve by having the SLT of the KCLSU kind of interacting face-to-face with students.
Sure. Because the key would be they lead KCLSU and they lead King's. The SLT are responsible for the oversight and for the leadership and for the vision of both organizations. And the fact that students have no direct way to communicate with them, I think is quite shameful. I don't even think many people in this room know who the SLT of KCLSU are, right? Exactly. So it's like, it's very odd that you represent an institution. Some of the officers even probably haven't met some of the SLT. So it's like, it's very odd that the SLT is not accountable to students in the same way that student officers are. And I think that's a shame. I think students need a clear way to communicate with the senior leadership team, whether that be monthly forums, or termly forums, specifically around specific issues or specific demographics, or where presidents of societies, for example, are invited to specifically communicate the concerns of their demographics to both KCSU senior leadership and King's senior leadership. Yeah, sure. Okay, well, I can just go on. I think another thing that I'm keen to do is re-implement the student council as listed in the KCSU bylaws. I think this is a huge area that is hugely underserved. The networks are there. Many of you may not even know what the networks are, but they're basically a group that's supposed to represent certain underrepresented groups, and there's about 10 of them, I believe, 6 of them, 6, 10, something like that. And they represent underrepresented groups, and they're meant to have a seat on the student council alongside the trustees and other members. That's currently not active. I think that will be a huge breakthrough in accountability, especially for the senior leadership team.
Thank you very much.
So the question is, some students feel that the KCLSU is not doing enough to address students' key concerns. How would you make communication more effective so that important student issues are actively addressed?
First thing I'd do is change the questionnaires. Everyone is sick of the emails of questionnaires. Many of the students just don't pay attention to them anymore, and rightly so. As a student rep, I managed to change the formatting and the timing of the questionnaires to involve a question concerning administration issues, and for it to come after exam periods so that you could also say, I've had these issues with exams. And I think that has had some positive impact, but it's very impersonal still. I have discussed with KCLSU staff in the course and just before this campaign about what if we could create some kind of more tightly knit committee. And then I suggested, well, we've kind of already got the network, we've got representatives, but there's not a lot of communication. I've done my best to try and do outreach with other reps from across the university during this campaign. I would like to use RAW as well.
Okay, fab. I guess my follow-up question is that your point about communication in terms of questionnaires is how the union gets information from students. And that seems like a good way to improve that. How do you improve the way that students get information on kind of ad hoc questions from the union?
I have been involved a bit in the Web3 space, decentralized internet effectively, because I've been trying to launch my own charity in the homelessness sector. And there's a big issue there with the structures not really communicating properly with themselves. And there's one company called HomelessLink, which has that system, but then it's not with the client. So I've been trying to design the client-centric form of this. And I've got a few backers, some of them global, which has been extremely cool. And they've really introduced me to this idea of decentralized information and how that could work. And a lot of it comes down to basically being able to see everything that's going on all the time. It's still secure, but that is the kind of idea I would like to work towards. It's something where students can see and comment in real time. One example I've thought of is with Keats. With Keats development, I've never understood why there aren't buttons on every page saying there's something wrong here, because everyone I've spoken to has an issue with Keats. And yet you have to go through 4, 6 different channels of conversation via email, which will get lost anyway, to try and get the enrollment key you need, or tell them a link is broken, or that the modules are misnamed, and nothing happens. And it's just unbelievable. I'd say just reduce the need for that admin and it'll be clearer.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We have a slightly more free-form section now. Thanks to everyone that has been submitting questions on the Slido. Obviously, it is more difficult to adjust these questions based on fairness because we don't have an unlimited amount of time. So what we've had is that we've had 4 what we believe to be suitable questions had in. I'm going to give them to you in chronological order. If someone would like to put their hand up to take the first question. None of these candidates know what the questions are. We've just got 4 of them. There's 4 candidates here in front of you. I thought that would be a fair way to do it. Any question from the 4 candidates? Just first person.
And if you still have a question, you can submit it on the Slido link, which is available on all platforms.
Which of the 4 would like to go first?
I can go.
Yeah, sure. The first question is, what are your plans to improve the sometimes slow and inefficient KCLSU admin system, especially around finance, which negatively affects how student groups can operate.
Sure. I think one thing KCSU has tried is bringing in more student staff to specifically help with that, and I think that can go even further, specifically with hiring student staff to respond to emails, train them with concerns. But I think one key thing that is missing across KCSU is peer-to-peer learning. I think that's very crucial, and there's currently no way in which presidents of societies can communicate with other presidents of societies apart from the WhatsApp chat, the student leaders WhatsApp chat. But other than that, I think there needs to be peer learning going on, because instead of relying on KCSU, I think a lot of students know how things work or have experience with certain things, and their advice will be crucial to presidents of other societies who are going through that. And I think that's a huge area that's underserved, because realistically, any organization cannot respond to emails every day. That's an unrealistic ask, especially if you want them to be effective in their actual jobs. It becomes very difficult for them to communicate every day to hundreds of students. There's over 400 societies at King's. I think that would be a very arduous task and not really the most effective way to go about it. So I think creating a way in which students can communicate with each other and share knowledge that way would be a huge help with specifically finances or with any other issue that students have with the SU.
Thank you very much. Which of the four would be happy to go next? Yeah. How will you go about ensuring that campus is a safe space for all communities, balancing commitments to free speech and, for example, a safe space policy?
Right. I think this is a bit of a conversation about common sense. Now, I'm going to say the first thing. As someone that came here from abroad, I've had to deal with my fair share of hurtful things being said to me, and as much as I hate the things that were said, and as much as I don't agree with the people that said it, I cannot stand here and deny their inherent right that this country offers them to say it. That being said, there's no reason why things like, again, common sense, this basic bit of education that, consider what you're saying, think about how you're planning on saying it. There's no reason why that shouldn't come into play. If you look at, I would say 99.9% of the hurtful statements that are made, and you just said, all right, let me see what point I'm trying to get across here. Let me see whether there's anything I can do to say it without being unduly hurtful to people that it may matter, people that may be affected by this. I think we could deal with this issue, again, by common sense. This is not something that the Students' Union can come in on and say that, there's going to be a censorship policy on campus and we're not going to allow people to have their views, because that's when democracy dies for me. Is it 1 minute 30 seconds? Yeah. So yeah, that's where democracy dies for me. That being said, guys, common sense is the name of the game.
So case by case basis. Thank you very much. The two of you who'd be the third question is, why is more not made of the fact that the King's living bursary has not increased in over a decade? It's not actually risen since 2012. Shouldn't the next president urgently prioritize this? You have 90 seconds.
Yeah, so like I said, the endowment funds need to be transparent and need to the SU needs to show where they're going. Obviously, it needs a raising because the living crisis, the housing prices have gone up significantly, and that obviously, of course, needs a raise. I just believe that we just need to allocate where the resources go. And right now, sitting here, I can't just make a claim that obviously it will go up by this percentage or that percentage, because you need to go deep in and just learn what's the actual reason it's not going up. That's not a very small thing to do. You take time, you need to learn where the actual funds are going, where it needs to go. KCLSU gets an X amount of endowment from KCL every year, and it increases up to a certain percentage every year. So you need to have that the chart, the funds and the accounts in front of you. You need to learn that. I believe that if not that, but KCLSU board, if not increasing the living bursary, they could have helped, for example, increasing cash room from 1,200 to at least 1,500 or 2,000 rooms. And talking about, as we said, cap wouldn't be a problem, but KCL has been providing caps to different university rooms for students. So they have been trying to work in different departments, if not increasing the living bursary. But I feel like looking deeper into that, as a candidate just sitting down here, I cannot claim something that cannot be done, and I make a false promise for you and just go back in the office if I get elected and be like, I can't do this, because I need to learn why it hasn't been increased. I need to go deeper inside and just learn where they actually, and be transparent to students and make them understand why it's not being increasing over the time.
Thank you.
So, apart from the initiatives you have mentioned, such as office hours and sending newsletters, how would you go about making the work of the president more accessible and transparent to both society leaders, students, and student media?
All right. I think the most important thing is communication. So, like I said, office hours, newsletters. If we can work on getting a network between presidents of different societies and the president of the SU, there are a plethora of different ways to connect. But the most important thing is communication, and that you do talk, and that you don't do things in silence and without consulting your fellow students, your fellow officers. Within societies, the president doesn't make decisions without going to the rest of the committee and without consulting the society members themselves. So whichever way they decide to do that, newsletter, office hour, council meetings, etc., the most important thing is that it does happen, and is that there is communication, and that there is a clear and honest and transparent line of communication there.
Thank you very much.
So the question that came in was about sports funding, and it was after a year of complaints about the quality of sports funding, how would you ensure that these groups have adequate support moving forward?
I'd like to trial the idea of a voucher system. I'm not sure quite the details of it yet because I'd need to be really saturated in the information, but I like the idea that you can have financial support going directly to societies when people want to try them out. And there's, again, makes it a bit quicker. You don't have to apply for funding or try and lobby against other societies and create that kind of friction. If anything, it might lead to more collaboration between societies, because then you get economies of scale. You already see that every sports night, basically, in a social context. I feel that the priority I have for everything to be sustainable and driven kind of by a mental health lens, not a medicalizing lens, but to prioritize societies, I think, is to prioritize social networks at university. And I feel like there's a lot of missing money, let alone the millions in cash that King's is currently sitting on, which they're putting into, I think, their Dubai campus as opposed to here. And I think having a bit more here in the institutions we currently have, sports institutions, makes so much sense. It fits with the King's Strategic Plan 2029. I think it does it better. It does it more immediately, and it's something I will definitely be lobbying for.
Thank you very much.
Just to be clear, the closing statements are also in the randomised order as well, so there won't be anyone who's got a particular preference on who gets to close. And Malak, would like to start with you for your 30-second closing statements.
Well, I want to thank the in-person audience and whoever's online for listening and tuning in, and hopefully me and the rest of the candidates were able to answer any of your concerns. The main thing I would like to reiterate is that mental health and society funding is the most important thing I think we can do within King's. Better mental health means happier students. Mental health can improve through funding, through better engagement in societies and student life, and I have now run over time. So thank you again.
Thank you, Bob.
No worries.
Yeah. Am I good to go? I mean, everything that I've heard so far, respectfully to all of my other candidates, has been a vote for me because I am this and I'm that. And am I allowed to stand up?
Yeah.
Look, I don't want to do that. If any of you do end up voting for me, I want you to vote for me because of what I'm going to do for you. Because, as I said, this is not a role about I bring this to the table, I bring that to the table. I will help you. I want you to vote for me because this is not about me and who I am. It's about each and every single one of you and who you are at its core. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. What sets me apart from the other candidates is perhaps being the most qualified and most experienced. And so, yes, it is about me. It is about what I bring to the table. It is about the proven success I've had advocating on behalf of students, both at King's, at KCLSU, on the national level with NUS and Student Minds. I am undoubtedly the most equipped candidate to advocate for these 4 areas that we've handled today. So with that in mind, please consider voting for Taj. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now you have 30 seconds to close the debate, and in this you would be the fourth one speaking. So you have 30 seconds to summarize everything. You're ready.
Well, I'm extremely grateful to even have the opportunity to be here, and I would really love the opportunity to go on to this position, try and do something useful with it. I would love to make this university full of people who don't feel like they don't belong, a lot of double negatives, but I certainly felt I had imposter syndrome for a long time here. And now I realize that everyone basically has similar experiences, whether they're students or societies or even staff. And I would love the chance to fix it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I just wrapped up my entire manifesto in these certain questions. I just want to say that's something, obviously, you bring something to the table, you work for the people, because like I said, KCLSU is a board of the students, by the students, and for the students. And we will make sure that we work for you guys. We make sure that your voices are heard, the communication, and it's been transparent. And obviously, you can hold us accountable. So I would be there out there just for you guys, the entirety of the body, and just help you out there and make sure that your new experience is way better than now. So I'll be there just to help you out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just quickly like to close to say thank you to everyone that's put in so much work organising this behind the scenes, the Bens, the Giselles, the Carises, the Liz's, the Joshes, who really made this happen. I'd like to thank everyone here today for turning up, and everyone who's submitted questions or just been simply watching online.
And thank you also to all the candidates for participating in this debate, and for those of you, who joined the live stream on this Saturday afternoon. And remember to vote. The voting opens on Monday at 10 a.m.
Thank you very much.